Welcome back, guys, to another math video. Now today we'll be finding the square root using prime factorization. Now before we begin, or before we dive into this exciting lesson, let us first review a few key concepts. What are square numbers? The square numbers are numbers that we get when we multiply an integer by itself. For example, 2 squared, which is the same thing as saying 2 times 2. Another example of a square number would be 12 squared, which is saying 12 times 12. Or another one is negative 9 squared, which is just us saying negative 9 times negative 9. So these are square numbers. So the next question is, what is the square root? Now, square root is the inverse operation of square. And you normally see this symbol right here with square root symbol. So we can find the square root of all numbers. But there are some numbers called perfect squares that when you find the square root of those numbers, you get a whole number. Right? So some numbers you'll get decimals, but with perfect squares you get an whole number. For example, you might be asked what is the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 would be 3. Right? So square root is the opposite or the inverse operation for a square. So 3 square is 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So the inverse operation. Alright, so for today's video, we'll be focusing on finding the square root of perfect squares. So those numbers that when you find the square root, you get a whole number using prime factorization. And again, prime factorization is just writing a number as the products of its prime factors. So we're using that concept to find the square root of different numbers. Now, there are 3 very simple steps to do this. So the first step is to find the prime factorization of the number, of the given number. Then the second step is to identify and make pairs of similar factors. And the third and final step is to choose one factor from each pair and find the product. And that is how you will find what the square root of that particular number is. So let's jump into doing some examples. So the first example that we have right here is using the prime factorization method. Find the square root of 1024. So we know that there are 2 ways that we can find the prime factorization. So we can create a factor tree, or we can use the table or ladder method. So you can use any one of them. So for this example, I'm going to create a factor tree. So I'm going to break up the 1024 into 2 factors. So the lowest prime factor is 2, and 2 into 1024 gives us 512. So 2 times 512 will give us this number right here. So this is a prime factor. We can't break that up anymore, but we can break up the 512. So we're going to break that up into product of its factors. So which is 2 times 256. So again, the 2 is a prime factor. So we are going to break up this right here. We're going to break it up into 2 times 128. Then we're going to break up the 128 into 2 times 64. We're going to break up the 64 into 2 times 32. We're going to break up the 32 into 2 times 8. 8 into 2 times 4. And the 4 into 2 times 2. So this is our factor tree right here. We have only prime factors here. So we're going to write a prime factorization of the number 1024. So the prime factorization is all of these prime factors multiplied together. So here we have the prime factorization. So the second step is to identify and make pairs of the similar factors. So we realize that all of these prime factors are 2's. We're going to make pairs. So we have one pair of 2, we have a second pair of 2, third pair of 2, fourth. So we have 5 pairs of 2. So that's our second step. And our final step is to choose one factor from each pair and multiply them. So the square root of 1024 is equal to, we're going to choose one factor from each pair. So one factor from this pair right here would be a 2. One factor from this pair would be a 2. One factor from this pair is another 2, another 2, and another 2. So we're finding the product of 5 2's. So 2 to the 5th power, and that is equal to 32. Therefore, the square root of 1024 is 32. So that's it. So we find the prime factorization of the number using the factor tree or the table method. Then we identify and make pairs of the similar factors. And then we choose one factor from each pair and find the product. So the second example that we have is to find the square root of 444. So this one will be a little bit easier. I'm going to use the ladder or the table method to find the prime factorization for this number. So here we go. So the smallest prime factor that can go into 441 is 3. 3 into 441 gives us 147. Then we identify the next lowest prime number that can go into this number right here, so 147, and that is also 3. So 3 into 147, we're left with 49. The lowest prime number that can go into 49 is 7. 7 into 49 gives us 7. And the lowest prime number that can go into 7 is 7. And we work this out until we have 1 as the remainder. So here we go. So the prime factorization for 444 would be each of the divisors. So 3 times 3 times 7 times 7, and we multiply them. So this is our prime factorization right here. So now we're going to go ahead and identify the pairs, or we're going to make pairs. So we have one pair of 3 and we have one pair of 7. So to find the square root of 441, we are just going to take one factor from each pair. So from the pair of 3, we're going to take a 3. And from the pair of 7, we're going to take a 7. And we find the product. So 3 times 7 is 21. Therefore, the square root of 441 is 21. So let's go with our third and final example. So it is to find the square root of 2116. So we're going to use the factor tree method. So go ahead, pause the video, attempt this question, and then resume. See if your working out is correct. So we're using the factor tree method. So we write our composite number, which is 2116. Then we're going to break this up into product of the factors. So the lowest factor is 2. 2 into this will give us 1058. So our product is 2 times 1058. We can break down the 2, but we can break the 1058 into 2 times 529. And then the 529 can be broken into 23 times 23. Now these 23 cannot be broken down anymore because these are prime numbers. So there we have it. So we have the prime numbers, which are 2, 2, 23, and 23. Therefore, the prime factorization of 2116 is 2 times 2 times 23 times 23. The next step is to find the square root of 2116, and we do that by identifying one factor from each pair. So we'll have 2 times 23, which gives us 46. Therefore, the square root of 2116 is 46. So that's it. So that's finding the square root using prime factorization. And remember that you identify pairs and then you select one factor from each pair. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more educational content.